In the 19th century, a wave of reported vampire attacks struck the rural countryside of New England. From Maine to Connecticut, rural farming families reported seeing the recently dead returning from their graves, family members being drained of life, and blood-bloated cadavers that refused to decay. The city newspapers of the time reported it as superstition, a reaction to the tuberculosis epidemic of the time. It is a narrative that modern historians have adopted, but there are many disturbing facts that one must ignore to believe such an explanation. Join us now as we take a new and disturbing look at the 19th century New England vampire panic. Unlike most stories involving superstition, the events of this story have a most definite starting place and time. The year was 1790. The location was the Tillinghast farm near Exeter, Connecticut. The story begins with the father, Stuckley Tillinghast, and his wife, Honor. They were successful and prosperous farmers, having established a thriving orchard business in the area. The Tillinghasts had 7 children. Their eldest daughter, Sarah, was born in 1777. By the 1790s, she was entering her teenage years, a bright and idealistic young woman. Sarah was said to enjoy reading and writing poetry, often seeking solitude in the countryside. She would visit the graves of Revolutionary War soldiers to read poems aloud. One day, after returning from one of these visits, she became very ill. Sarah was diagnosed with what doctors of the time called consumption, the name given as the affliction slowly consumed the energy and life force from the body over the course of years. Historians today believe that consumption was what is known today as tuberculosis, a disease that would leave the victim a lifespan of about 7 years on average. But Sarah did not have 7 years left. The life seemed to drain a little more from her every single night. Within a few weeks she was bedridden, and within a few months she died. She was buried in the family cemetery not far from the family farmhouse. Not long after her death, one of her siblings fell ill, displaying the same consuming symptoms. But with it came one new and disturbing element. Their afflicted child claimed that Sarah had returned from the graveyard, scaled the house exterior, and climbed through her window into the room. There she hovered over the bed, Sarah's unearthly presence filling the room with a dark and dreadful atmosphere. The poor child did not last long, and was consumed within the course of a few months and died. No sooner did they bury that child than another one fell ill, with all the same circumstances, and passed away as well. It was happening like falling dominoes. A total of 5 children in the family fell ill in sequence, bore with the same symptoms and circumstances, and died. Then their mother, Honor, also became sick, and reported to her husband that one of their children, or an undead, semi-corporeal form of them, had visited her in the dead of night. At the time, some in New England remembered the folklore regarding vampires, a belief carried over from some European traditions. The belief was that the dead could feed, spiritually on the living, draining their life. According to the long-dismissed myths, the vampire could only be stopped by finding the offending cadaver and destroying its heart to stop the deaths. Tillinghast was not superstitious. He was a successful and well-regarded property owner, but the things that had befell his family he could not ignore nor endure any further. He had to know, and the only way to find out for sure was to exhume the bodies of his children from the family cemetery. Tillinghast enlisted his fellow neighbors, the Wilcoxes, the Gardners, the Mooneys, and the Whitfords. Together, they performed the grim task. They dug up each child's body one by one. By then, most had decayed to bones and moldy cloth. But when they opened Sarah's grave, the first of his children to be buried, a collective gasp issued from the stunned group. Her body appeared untouched. Her eyes were open, staring up at them with a malevolent vacancy. Her skin still appeared fresh, and there were traces of blood on her face, their resolve reinforced by the astounding and unearthly sight before them. Stuckley Tillinghast did not hesitate. He cut out Sarah's heart, placed it on a large stone beside the grave, and burned it to ashes. After that night, Stuckley's wife, Honor Tillinghast, who had fell ill in the same way as the children, recovered from her illness. The night visitations stopped. Honor's grave is one of the few in the cemetery today that is still readable. The others worn flat by time. Her tombstone says she died on December 2nd, 1831, at 87 years old. The father's stone is also believed to be here. Too difficult to identify, dozens of small stones mark children's graves. After this incident, history records many similar reports of vampire consumption. Dummerston, Vermont, 1792. Manchester, Vermont, 1794. South Woodstock, Vermont, 1817. New Ipswich, New Hampshire, 1818. Griswold, Connecticut, 1826. Foster, Rhode Island, 1827. Woodstock, Vermont, 1830. North Cumberland, Rhode Island, 1841. Westerly, Rhode Island, 1850. Jewett City, Connecticut in 1854. Wyndham, Connecticut, 1859. Grafton, New York, 1867. Cornwall, Connecticut in 1869. Peacedale, New York, 1872. Exeter, Rhode Island, 1892. The incidents were so frequent, the citizens of rural towns formed vampire hunting patrols to assist in the eradication of the shadowy menace. Over 100 years of vampire consumption incidences before what was to be known as the New England vampire panic finally ran its course. Throughout that century, newspapers savaged the foolish idea that vampires plagued the remote countryside communities. Those editorials of the day carried on as judgment by modern-day historians. The idea that it was all due to tuberculosis, combined with ignorant superstition and mass hysteria. But there are some disturbing inconsistencies with this narrative. While tuberculosis was indeed an epidemic throughout New England in the 1800s, the vast concentration of it was in the cities, where dense populations allowed the disease to spread easily. Yet all the known incidences of alleged vampire activity were in small, rural, secluded communities. As also previously stated, tuberculosis was a slowly progressing disease, requiring many years to prove fatal. Yet in all cases of reported vampire activity, the life-draining process was far quicker, occurring in mere months, and accompanied by the reports of those who had fallen ill. The testimony that their dead family members were returning in the dead of night to drain them of their life. And finally, the shocking evidence when remains, buried for years in the damp earth, unembalmed, were found fresh and unspoiled. Their eyes wide open, bloated full of blood. By the 1900s, the New England vampire panic did end, but why? Did modern education finally stamp out superstition in rural New England? Did the vampire hunters of the time finally eradicate the last of their quarry? Perhaps the widespread introduction of the practice of embalming the dead in the early 1900s quelled the abilities of the undead to return and feed on the living. Or perhaps the large-scale migration of rural villagers to larger towns at the turn of the century deprived the residents of the lonely, secluded graves of regular contact with their human host. There are many isolated woods in New England today that still hold the foundations of long-abandoned villages, and each has at least one forgotten graveyard. Locals will tell you avoid these areas, as some people have vanished into them. Considering the long and strange history of rural New England, it is some very good advice to heed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, consider liking and subscribing. It would help motivate me to bring you more entries into the Dark Journal.